When Tim Pool appeared on Joe Rogan's show with Twitter executives Jack Dorsey and Vijay Gotti a few months ago, it was frustrating to watch the people who run the company unable to explain not only the nonsensical policy outcomes at Twitter, where saying men are not women will get a feminist banned, but Kathy Griffin trying to dox kids is just fine, but unable to explain their philosophy either. During that show, it became clear that Twitter has fundamentally incompatible goals that it's trying to pursue simultaneously. On the one hand, they speak about empowering the individual to the maximum extent.
The more control we can give people to vary the spectrum on what they want to see, that feels right to me.
These are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. How do we give power back to the people using our service so that they can see what they want to see and they can participate the way they want to participate?
On the other hand, they speak about the need to crack down on people who use their voices to silence the voices of others, a concept that doesn't even make sense. I can't silence your speech simply by responding to it.
I believe that everyone has a voice and should be able to use it. Now, where we draw a line is when people use their voice and use their platform to abuse and harass other people to silence them.
What we're trying to drive is opportunity for every single person to be able to speak freely on the platform. When some people encounter particular conduct that we see them wanting to remove themselves from the platform completely, which goes against that principle of enabling everyone to speak or giving people the opportunity to speak.
And what you're left with is this bizarre philosophy that says we have to censor to increase speech. We have to censor to make more speech available. To borrow the phrases, we have to bomb for peace or we have to bang for chastity. You get to pick one of these things, but not both. And the reason Twitter keeps policing its platform in nonsensical ways is because they believe these goals are somehow compatible. They aren't. And it appears Jack and Vijay learned nothing from that Joe Rogan episode. Doublethink will continue to be the centerpiece of Twitter's use policy. And unfortunately for all of us, it now goes well beyond just whether we're able to enjoy some banter on Twitter or not. Now it's about who can run for office on Twitter or not. Last Wednesday, Twitter announced new policies in pursuit of upholding election integrity on the platform. Twitter says voting is a fundamental human right, and the public conversation occurring on Twitter is never more important than during elections. And any attempts to undermine the process of registering to vote or engaging in the election is contrary to the company's core values. Therefore, in preparation for the upcoming elections in India and European Union elections, Twitter will be policing misleading information about how to vote, requirements for voting, and polling places and times. Twitter doesn't mention it outright, but reporting on the update mentions, of course, the eternal boogeyman of Russian election meddling in 2016, those dreaded memes and Facebook ads that are somehow responsible for the illegitimate election of the President of the United States. And here we encounter yet another philosophical contradiction for Twitter, another clash of the core company values where only one can truly win. If you stand for free and fair elections, but you've already established that only certain voices count in what you view as a healthy public dialogue, what happens when those exiled voices start running for office? Is it more important to be that platform for those free and fair elections where the public gets to decide what ideas are best? Or is it more important that the election only be as free and as fair as mom wants it to be?
In many cases, if they do it again, we give them a timeout.
Timeout, you're a mom.
I'm totally a mom, exactly.
And you could have predicted the outcome, of course, but now we know for sure since as of Friday, Twitter has banned the campaign accounts of both Carl Benjamin, otherwise known as Sargon, and Tommy Robinson. Both of them are running to be members of the European Parliament for different regions of England. Both of them, of course, are facing an onslaught of supposedly nonpartisan, objective press scrutiny. And recall, as individuals and not political candidates or campaigns, both Carl and Tommy have previously had their personal Twitter accounts permanently banned. In Sargon's case, it was never really fully explained, just that he violated Twitter's rules generally. In Tommy's case, he was first temporarily suspended for tweeting out factual information about grooming gang demographics in the UK, soon thereafter permanently banned for just general, quote, hateful conduct. Before we get to the principles of the issue, there's a little more complexity in the weeds here. Twitter is currently saying very little on these two bannings, but generally says the campaign accounts violated Twitter policy on evading suspension. That case isn't clear-cut. Strictly speaking, these accounts were run by campaign staff or volunteers, not Carl or Tommy themselves, but skeptics point to an isolated instance of Carl's account using first-person language that doesn't necessarily prove anything, and even if it does, it's beside the point of the broader issue here, which is the philosophy of the decision to ban. Beyond just the new statement and the new policy from Twitter about upholding election integrity, Jack Dorsey has previously stated that Twitter bends the rules for political and other high-profile figures intentionally. Why? Well, according to Twitter's published rules, because those tweets are newsworthy. It's in the public's interest to evaluate that public figure for themselves. Jack Dorsey explained his thinking during his solo appearance with Joe Rogan as it applies to Donald Trump breaking the rules.
The most controversial aspect of our rules and our terms of service is probably this clause around public interest and newsworthiness. The tweet itself is of public interest.
Yes.
There should be a conversation around it. We should see how our leaders think and how they act.
And essentially,
that informs voting. That informs the conversation. That informs whether we think they're doing the right job, or we think that they should be voted out.
Why wouldn't that reasoning protect Carl and Tommy the same way it protects Donald Trump? Since it obviously doesn't, as Twitter has enforced it. Where was that line drawn? Is it because Donald Trump is currently in office and not just a candidate? If so, why would you give an incumbent a special benefit over a challenger? Is it that President of the United States is a higher office than member of European Parliament? If so, where is that line of importance? Is it not important for me to see what my city council member is saying or what my candidate for city council is saying? If the goal is to inform voting, as Jack says, you cannot make distinctions on what votes for what offices matter. And you certainly can't ban options for my vote outright. I was reading some Twitter threads on this story, and a lot of responses from progressives dealt with the rights issue. Well, Twitter is a private company. They don't have to host anyone they don't want to. Unless, of course, Carl and Tommy decide to get married and they're in need of a wedding cake, in which case Jack must bake it. But yes, I agree. Twitter doesn't have an obligation to host. But that's not the issue of controversy here. The issue is the hypocrisy and the contradiction of saying that you stand for free and fair elections, that your platform will do everything it can to uphold them, all the while you are banning candidates running for office in those elections. And more ironic still, this is a cure that is far worse than the disease. This all fits in the context of fear about foreign election meddling, that Russian trolls somehow stole the 2016 presidential election illegitimately, and in ironically hilarious overcorrection for that fear, Twitter executives have now become foreign election meddlers. And what meddling do you honestly think is more impactful? A few stupid Trump pepes from some shady no-name Russian account? Or the outright banning of certain campaigns off an entire public forum? How is this effort not massively magnifying the problem it is seeking to correct? When I last talked about Twitter's leadership after the Tim Pool appearance on Joe Rogan's show, I commented that Twitter has a lot of serious identity searching to do. Do they want to be the platform that empowers the individual, as Jack describes, or do they want mom to hover over all of her children, as Vidya describes? Twitter can't decide, so they pursue both to nonsensical outcomes. And now they have a compounding identity crisis. Do they believe in election freedom, or do they believe in enforcing their standards of wrongthink? They cannot have both. And if they don't course correct, I can only hope that Jack Dorsey gets half the media scrutiny that Vladimir Putin did. But I'm not holding my breath. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.